Yo, what is happening, guys? How are you doing? This is Rob of Ro2R Review. Welcome back, and today let's talk a little bit about the third-party port situation for the Nintendo Switch. So this exact topic is something that's been on my mind since E3 wrapped up, where, as you've heard me say a few times, I feel like E3 was so impressive in terms of how many incredible games were shown off, announced, demoed, revealed, all sorts of things. There was just a lot of great content coming out of the show. Yes, there were awkward moments with a lot of the presentations, and as I discussed for like 25 minutes, EA had probably the worst press conference I've ever seen. But still, I thought that E3 was fantastic, and like I was just saying, showed us so many incredible games for all consoles. Now, of course, I want to relate this topic specifically to the Nintendo Switch, because I'm a super huge Nintendo fan. It's my favorite console and company, and as you guys know, that's mostly what we talk about here is Nintendo, and stuff surrounding the Switch. And with all of these great games, and so many incredible multi-platform third-party ports existing across the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One and PC, and some on the Switch as well, I started to realize and continue to think, man, at this point in 2018, almost 5 years into the PS4 and Xbox One's life, we're in year 2 of the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch has been so much bigger of a hit than anyone could have hoped for. I feel like we shouldn't be seeing a situation where so many big third-party games are still being announced without a Nintendo Switch port. Now, of course, those of you guys who know me and are familiar with Ro2R Review already know that I am not like hating on non-Nintendo consoles. I have an Xbox One and a PS4. I love them to death. I play them just as often as my Nintendo Switch. I play all the third-party multi-platform games that I want to because I have all 3 consoles available to me. And that is fine. But of course, as a Nintendo fan and as somebody who loves the portable nature of the Switch, I get really excited when I think about a brand new humongous third-party game coming out that looks really fantastic that I could possibly play on my Nintendo Switch and be able to pick that thing up off its dock at any time. I play my Nintendo Switch around my house or laying in bed before the end of the night all of the time. I'm a huge fan of that. And again, I say this as somebody who doesn't even take my Nintendo Switch out into the world. I'm like too terrified to bring my $300 Switch outside of my house very often. It's usually just me going into my living room or hanging out in our bedroom, you know, like I said, falling asleep. I love to be playing an incredible, huge, AAA, gigantic video game just in my hand while laying in bed as opposed to being stuck and tethered to my TV. It's the coolest part about the Switch. Plus, as a Nintendo fan, I would like to see Nintendo's third-party relationships continue to get better, see that third-party library continue to grow, which we have seen in the Switch age, which has been fantastic, but I feel like it should be continuing to grow, and I don't really know that after E3 this year, we saw evidence that it's really getting that much better, at least just yet. Essentially what I'm getting at here with this topic is the idea that we are still seeing some of the biggest third-party developers and publishers, even though a lot of them are breaking the doors down and starting to bring some really great games over to the Nintendo Switch, which is great to see. We're still seeing some of these developers with their biggest games that would be so perfect for the Switch be a little bit reluctant to bring some of these games to the Switch, and there seems to be some trepidation still with a lot of these developers as far as working with Nintendo and wanting to make sure that their game and their game's engine can be ported properly over to the Nintendo Switch. And I think that that's a shame, and I really think that we're at the point with how successful the Nintendo Switch is selling and how incredibly well all of the software, first party, third party, indie, downloadable, digital only, whatever it is, everything is selling so fantastically well on the Switch. It's insane, man. And so really, I don't understand why some of these companies are still being so coy. Now, of course, I'm trying not to be like the crazy fanboy here who's completely like oblivious to some of the hardcore facts. Like, I understand, as much as I love the Switch and its impressive technology, yeah, it's not as powerful as a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, obviously not in the same league as a PC. I get that. And not only is it even less powerful, it's also incredibly different architecture than its competing consoles, which also prevents a little bit of a barrier as far as bringing some games over to the Switch. I totally get that. And typically, a lot of third-party games haven't sold well on Nintendo consoles in the past. A lot of times, mature third-party content has done even worse on Nintendo consoles in the past. I acknowledge all of that. The only reason that this topic came to my head and felt worthy of talking about is because literally, the way I see it personally, in the Switch age currently, in this current era of Nintendo and the current landscape of the whole video game industry, it is different. It's different than it's ever been. That's why games like LA Noire and Resident Evil and Doom and some of these big third-party titles that I usually reference in this kind of situation, why they've done so well. Those are mature games. Those are third-party games that are in many cases are very graphically intensive. Wolfenstein 2 is on its way, we know, of course, as well. Dark Souls Remaster is coming. These games are selling on the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo gamers want these games on their Nintendo console. It's very different than in years past and in generations past where that really wasn't the case. And with the numbers being there and the money to be made being evident to all involved, it's really just getting to the point where it doesn't make sense for a lot of these companies to be so nervous to want to bring their games over to the Switch. And of course, in still not trying to be so blinded by like, quote, fanboyism or whatever anyone else might want to claim here, I also understand, and a lot of people have to understand this as well. Of course, because the architecture is so different for the Switch, these companies, they definitely have to spend a little bit of different time and money to make their games port over to the Switch. A lot of times they have to get their own team separate from the team already working on the game to make it available on the Nintendo Switch and make it work with the different architecture that is that console. And that's why a lot of times we see the games, even when they are being announced for the Nintendo Switch, coming out later. That definitely happens. Or sometimes they even outsource that to a different company, like Panic Button, for example, which is becoming famous for making incredible Nintendo Switch ports right now. They're making their whole business model off of it, basically. Sometimes that has to happen as well. So it's, when we look at the dollars and cents, it's like, okay, it's going to cost a little bit maybe to have to make your game run on the Nintendo weird hardware. Totally get that. But again, when the numbers and sales are there, and when you're also gaining the goodwill, I think, of the consumer and the gamer, and specifically of the Nintendo fan, which represents 1/3 of the console gaming market, you're only doing good things for yourself. And obviously, great sales of XYZ version of any multi-platform game you're making are going to make up the cost for having to have a unique team just to develop that one, or having to outsource to a Beanox or a Tantalus or a Panic Button just to make that game. You recoup your costs. That's the investment of doing business in this industry. I think what's also frustrating enough to have made me want to make this video is the fact that I would totally understand not seeing some of these great games coming to the Switch if we were still in the age of Nintendo where it was a problem, where third parties weren't making sense for that console, were that much harder and expensive to develop for. We've seen how great you can get your games to run on the Nintendo Switch. It seems like incredibly versatile hardware. We have to acknowledge that. And if, the console wasn't selling well and there wasn't a lot of hype and excitement around Nintendo's platform, totally get it. You don't want to bring these games to the console. But again, the whole point of this is that I see a different Nintendo now. We are in a different age where the past does not really affect the present. Not when it comes to Nintendo specifically. And when I look at E3 and what happened, and so many incredible games were announced, and they're not coming to the Switch? I mean, how is a game like Nier Automata not coming to the Switch? Or Kingdom Hearts? Or Assassin's Creed? Resident Evil 2 Remake? Oh my goodness, that game totally should be on the Switch. Capcom has already brought a Resident Evil game to the Switch with a lot of success. Madden is insane not to have on the console. Obviously, as a Star Wars dork, I want to see these Star Wars games start coming to the Switch. Battlefront 2 should have already made it over. They just announced that Fallen Order game, which I'm incredibly excited for. I know it's going to be graphically crazy, but I still will not doubt that you could make that game run on the Switch if you cared to do so, and if they were willing to spend the time and money to do so. And then, like, a game like Call of Duty? How was Call of Duty still not announced for the Nintendo Switch in 2018? And, I acknowledge that, for all we know, before the year is over, a Nintendo Direct or a press release by any given different developer might confirm, hey, it turns out Kingdom Hearts is coming, Call of Duty is coming, Resident Evil is coming. Sure, that might still happen, and we've seen that happen before. In fact, we've seen that happen with Dragon Ball FighterZ. That game, just recently, was announced for the Switch at E3 several months after it launched on the PS4 and Xbox One. So, hey, that's cool. Better late than never for sure. But we're at the point with E3 and all of these games, and like I said, Call of Duty is the one that stings the most, I think, or maybe even Nier. How those games are not being brought by those developers over to the Nintendo Switch blows my mind. There's only money to be made for everybody, and there's only gamers to be made happy. And I'm somebody who would like to play Nier and Call of Duty, for example, on my Nintendo Switch. I mean, I'm not an Assassin's Creed fan, but I might be willing to try it if it came to the Nintendo Switch, and I definitely want Resident Evil 2 on the Nintendo Switch, but that's one I'm so invested in. I will absolutely buy it no matter what platform it releases for, so I'm very excited for that game. But, at the end of the day, I think my point still stands. The Switch is so successful, and the Nintendo we're dealing with is so different with such great marketing. I just think that there's really not much of an excuse for most of these developers not to bring some of these games over to the Switch. So I know that somehow this turned into a little bit of a rant. I didn't really have that kind of like heat and passion necessarily in me when I started this video and thought about the idea, but obviously I was at least invested enough to want to make the video and have the conversation. And, you know, the more I talked about it, the more I realized it's just kind of that frustrating, man. And, you know, this is, again, not trying to come from this fanboy perspective. You guys know me. I love it. I'm very happy playing on my Xbox and PlayStation. I just love my Switch the most, and I love that portable nature, and I want to see these games come to the console. I want to see that Nintendo's relationships with third parties continue to grow. And I would like to see some of these third parties really start to recognize we're being completely daft by not bringing XYZ game over to the Switch. This game belongs on that console. The gamers who like that console deserve to be able to play it. And we'll only make money because you could put dog crap on a stick on the Nintendo Switch and people are going to buy that game because they're like, oh great, another game on the Switch. I love my Switch games and so I'm going to buy it just because it's here. That's the nature of the beast, and that's where we are with 2018 Nintendo and in the 2018 industry. So with any luck, you know, this rant aside, with any luck, this situation will continue to improve. And I actually do have faith it's going to improve. I know it might not seem like it here at the end of this kind of ranty video, but I do have faith. We've seen great strides on the third-party relations with the Switch and with Nintendo as a company. It's been great to see. It's got me very happy, and I just want to see it continue, hopefully at a faster pace. By next year, there aren't too many high-profile third-party games that I think shouldn't come to the Switch. It would be really silly if some of these big games that I named today don't make it over. So that's it for me today. Consider this weird random rant over. I think I'm good. I got this out of my system, which felt pretty nice. Tell me what you guys think about this topic. Do you think it's as silly as I do that some of these companies are still being coy with Nintendo? Does it make sense to you why they are and they're under no obligation to have to port to the Switch? Maybe you see it that way as well. All opinions are welcome as always here, so please let me know what you think in the comments below. That is it for me. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.